Coalition for Good Governance and Accountability has raised alarm over plots to destabilize the administrator of Benue State, Governor Hyacinth Alaya. While the coalition claims to have uncovered schemes by certain individuals whom they describe as political failures seeking to undermine the governor's development efforts. Now, a statement issued by Comrade Joseph Onjeh on behalf of the coalition condemns these efforts and pledges full support for Governor Alaya's leadership, urging those behind the attacks to reconsider their actions. Despite the governor's ongoing progress in the state, the coalition claims that there are individuals disgruntled by the shift from traditional political patronage who are plotting to tarnish his reputation. Well, recent press conferences allegedly sponsored by these elements have accused Alaya of various offenses, which the coalition labels as baseless and fabricated. The coalition argues that these accusations are part of a coordinated effort to portray the governor's leadership, which places the welfare of the people above political gains as authoritarian. Well, let's now take a further look at the recent judgments by the Benue State Local Government Election Tribunal and an alleged plot to destabilize Governor Hyacinth Alaya's administration via the judiciary, as well as some other crises that need resolving within the Benue State APC, which are causing issues, as we will be discussing with our APC chieftain in Benue State, Daniel Onjeh, joining us now from Abuja. Thank you so much for joining us here on Newsday.
Thank you for having me here again.
Well, let's start with the judiciary. What's your stance on the recent judgments that were delivered by the Benue State Local Government Election Tribunal? Are you satisfied with the outcome?
No one is satisfied with the outcome. The majority of Benue indigenes are not satisfied with the outcome because the judgment is perverse. There are twin issues that were tabled before, before the tribunal, or the question the tribunal had to resolve whether or not anyone who didn't participate in an election has the local standing to approach the tribunal and seek declaration and be declared. Now the tribunal, some of the judges of the tribunal had gone ahead to declare persons who did not participate in an election. This is unheard of. This is ridiculous. This is a mockery of judiciary in Nigeria. Not in the history of any nation has anybody, indeed this should go down a Guinness Book of Record, where persons who did not participate in the election were declared from tribunal. That means someday in even the nearest future, just any citizen can get up and approach the tribunal after elections and be declared as a reps member or as a senator. That is what the judges are saying. That is against the provision of the law. We all know that the people vested with the locals to approach the tribunal after the elections are either the candidate who stood for the election or the sponsoring party. But in this case, some persons suo motu on their own, not even with the political party, approach the local government election tribunal in Benue State. And right now, as I speak to you, they have been declared as the winners of the local government elections, which were held last year, towards the end of last year. Then the second issue is whether or not the petition of a petitioner will be considered potent when the petitioner fails to pay the mandatory security deposit as provided by the law. Now, in the electoral law made by the authority that is vested with the powers to make the law in line with Section 7 of the 1999 Constitution as amended, which is the Benue State House of Assembly. The law was made that before a petition can proceed in the tribunal, the petitioner shall pay the mandatory deposit. It is an elementary knowledge in law that where the word shall is used in any provision of the law, it spells or emphasizes a mandatory process or act that must be done, precedent upon which others can follow. And in Section 76, subsection 1 to 4 of the Benue State Electoral Act states that a petitioner must pay a mandatory deposit, security deposit. And in subsection 4, it says that if a petitioner fails to pay, that the proceeding of on that petition stops, cannot continue. But these two questions were answered in the negative by some judges. Only one judge that was in charge of the Benue Zone B that delivered judgment in accordance with the provision of the law, returning all the genuine candidates who won the election. The judge took a principled stand. The judge was very resolute that they cannot take benefit of a process they did not partake in. And secondly, also, they did not pay the security deposit. And of course, a third issue is the issue of whether or not the tribunal can entertain an internal dispute between candidates of a party who are contesting over who is a candidate. It's a long settled principle and position of the law, even up to Supreme Court, that it is a pre-election matter. The names of these candidates that have been declared were not submitted to the Benue State Independent Electoral Commission, that's the BSEC. The BSEC, the electoral umpire, did not publish their names as required by the law, and as such, they cannot be declared. They are not, in fact, they are not even known to the tribunal. But then we must not gloss over the cause of all of these crises we're witnessing in Benue. The governor has detractors who appear not to be comfortable with his style of governance, which is focused on the well-being of the generality of the Benue State people, against the hitherto or against the status quo that existed for over 2 decades in Benue State, in the entire life of governance in Benue State, where few majorities fleece public funds with every level of impunity, and even at that, callously, in a very callous manner, owing workers, Benue workers, their salaries, pensions, and gratuity. But here is a governor that is focused on the welfare of the people. He has cleared all the backlog of salaries of workers in Benue State. We all know in this country at a particular time, when the immediate past governor made it appear as if it was rocket science, paying workers their dues. But this governor has cleared, he's paying pension, he's paying gratuities, and massive infrastructural development going on in Benue State. The Benue people are happy. The ripple effect of this singular act of paying this salary is trickling down the ordinary person on the streets of Benue State, and the people are happy. But these people are not happy because the governor has...
Please allow me to interrupt you for the sake of time.
With them.
You talked about the fact that the governor has some detractors. So I'd like that to lead us into my next question, which is there any evidence to support the claim of a plot to destabilize Governor Alia's administration via the judiciary? And what measures do you think the governor can take to protect his administration from potential judicial challenge and ensure smooth governance in Benue State?
Well, I will need to give you a brief background to the activities of these detractors of the governor. First, you will recall at a certain time, some persons through the National Assembly wanted to stop the local government allocation in Benue State, but they failed. Their motion failed on the hallowed chamber of the Senate because the senators were wiser than the people who pushed for the agenda, because it was more or less like a booby trap for them. Even the president of the country, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, knows that he does not have the authority to stop the allocation of any arm or tier of government. This is a cause he fought in Lagos until the Supreme Court made that pronouncement, because during his administration, the funds of the local government were held, and the Attorney General under his administration as a governor pursued the case until it was realized. They failed on that. Secondly, so the first they came, they wanted to hijack the leadership of the State House of Assembly to plant their puppet as a speaker so that they can hold the government or the governor to ransom or hold him hostage. But they failed. Secondly, they went to the National Assembly to stop allocation to local government. They also failed. Now they are trying to use the judiciary. It is obvious because the Chief Judge of Benue State, who was recommended for suspension by the State House of Assembly in line with Section 205, has shown clearly that his bias and in the struggle to share state power and resources with Father Alia, he appears to be playing a major role. The judiciary in Benue appear to be interested in sharing state power with the governor, Father Hissem Yomen Alia, and also to share state resources with him. Otherwise, the Chief Judge of Benue State should have known that after constituting the tribunal, he becomes functus official. That is, his job and duty ends. But he went further on behalf of the tribunal to unlawfully grant a waiver on this security deposit that I talked about, as provided in Section 76, subsection 1 to 4 of the Benue State Electoral Law for local government. When it is a mandatory position, the provision of the law said that the petitioner shall pay. Otherwise, the proceeding on his petition ends. He went to grant waiver, and as soon as he granted this illegal waiver to some prospective petitioners, over 200 petitioners from the same All Progressive Congress, APC, approached the tribunal. These are the people that are being declared right now. I believe this gives you a clearer idea of why the Benue State House of Assembly raised a red flag, raised an alarm, and recommended its removal, because it is a subversion of democracy and the integrity of the judiciary in Benue State. Because that action is an overreach of his office. Judges are meant to interpret and apply law, but not to review and amend law. But Justice Ikpambese, the Chief Judge of Benue State, reviewed or amended the Benue State House of Assembly law that he makes for local government. That is an overreach of his office and is sufficient enough to be removed. In the face of the provision of Section 205, subsection 1A, Roman figure 2, that spell or specify how a chief judge of a state can be removed. The State House of Assembly acting on a brief and recommending its removal, then the governor automatically act or naturally act by carrying out, by executing the recommendation of the State House of Assembly, which was what was done. But the governor was harassed. The NJC, the NBA appeared to have been doing the bidding of these detractors in Benue State. They harassed him into submitting the recommendation of the State House of Assembly for the removal of Chief Justice Bambese. After he committed that act, they push him into submitting the recommendation to them. As I speak with you up to today, the NJC has not acted on that recommendation, including other petitions that have been put before the NJC. That shows clearly that they are complicit in what is going on in Benue State. Their
Well, let me
inaction
interrupt you
suggests
for the sake of time,
they are
obviously. What actions do you think...
Because they ought to have acted on it. If they have acted
Daniel.
on it, all of this judicial crisis in Benue will have ended. As I speak to you, the judiciary is divided as it is in Benue State right
Daniel,
now.
we're running out of time. So
Because
just
these
really
judges
quickly,
who
I
are
want to know what
principled
actions
and are
you think the
standing by the
governor
truth
should take to
definitely will be
solidify
working
his
or moving,
administration
working
against the plots
be
that
at
have been
loggerhead,
formulated against him.
with
Oh, it
the
seems
Chief
like
Justice,
you can't hear me,
the
obviously.
Chief Judge.
Thank you so much for joining us, Daniel. I know that we have audio issues. You cannot hear me as we communicate. But of course, thanks for joining us for this discussion on Newsday. Daniel Onjeh, APC Chieftain in Benue State.